The prism spires of Ilthar Prime shimmered like sacred glass swords jutting into a gold-flecked sky, each one humming with the frequency of conquest. Beneath their towering brilliance, the highest echelons of the Vael Dominion gathered. Robes, billowing, neural bands polished, expressions stiff with pride, while a choir of synthetic minds sang the final harmonization. On the grand dais, Marshal Krex, cold-eyed and unflinching, declared with imperial certainty, "Humanity is no longer a variable. It is an entry concluded." Applause echoed across the star systems. The remains of the rogue human cruiser, the EI Star Dandelion, hung in orbit like a shattered reliquary, and within its burnt hull lay a charred humanoid, displayed in full ceremonial broadcast as Lyra Von neutralized. Dominion channels looped the footage across all sectors for 3 cycles, showcasing scorched metal, ruptured panels, and one unrecognizable broken body as undeniable proof. No one questioned it, not even when, weeks later, a mining drone on the Forsaken Moon Jexen 3 flagged a biometric anomaly pulsing weakly beneath its crust. Dominion technicians, gripped by victory hangovers, labeled it a sensor ghost, a glitch. They logged it, filed it, and returned to their celebrations. The drone, however, didn't agree. It detonated in a localized flare, leaving behind no data. Signature, no recoverable parts. Only a single heat-sealed envelope buried in the crater ash. Inside, one line written in careful, looping Terran script. Still breathing. Warm regards, L. The moment that note reached the Dominion intelligence grid, Marshal Krex's wineglass froze mid-air, droplets shimmering in anti-grav as silence infected the war chamber. "It's a forgery," he said too quickly, "or a prank." But his eyes twitched, just once, betraying a crack. The Intelligence Bureau scrubbed every layer of the signal's origin, but all trails ended in recursive loops, Terran jazz chords, and once, an intercepted transmission featuring a human voice humming Moonlight Serenade. Across fringe sectors, Dominion patrols started reporting minor anomalies, cargo logs overwritten in extinct languages, food replicators producing Earth coffee, subspace frequencies that only played elevator music. No one died. Nothing exploded. But every officer who encountered it filed reports that read more like therapy transcripts than tactical memos. One scout captain sobbed into a debriefing, whispering, "She made me tea, I drank it, I don't even know why." Dominion leadership issued strict orders. Do not engage, ignore the signal, destroy any artifact that bears her name. But it was too late. Lyra Von had become a whisper, and whispers in empires are like termites in marble, silent, slow, inevitable. Somewhere in a rusted subterranean bunker, beneath a forgotten observatory once built by Earth scientists, Lyra stood barefoot, on cracked floor tiles, watching Dominion broadcasts play back her own funeral. Her shoulder bore the faint scar of plasma burns. Her AI companion Bird flickered into life through a handheld relic cobbled from 6 enemy relays and the audio guts of a child's music box. "You died quite convincingly," Bird chirped. Glitching on the word died. Lyra took a sip from a tin cup of tea and smiled faintly. "Good. Now let's make them regret filming it in high definition." She picked up a satchel, red, dented, stitched with old NASA patches, and walked out into the ghost light of the broken moon beneath a sky full of stars that had forgotten Earth. But Earth, in its quiet, sarcastic, terrifying persistence, had not forgotten them. The Vael Dominion, ever obsessed with ceremony and control, responded to the phantom of Lyra Von with predictable overreach, broadcast denials, memory purges, and even a revision to their official history archives, labeling her as a collective delusion seeded by residual Terran trauma. But facts had never been Lyra's weapons. Belief was, and belief doesn't vanish under decree. It spreads. Somewhere in the frozen outskirts of the Krython Shard cluster, a Dominion supply frigate drifted slightly off course. When it corrected and docked at Outpost 3LA, the station appeared fully operational. Every light was green. Every system pinged. Nominal. The crew entered to find the entire station crew gone. No bodies. No signs of conflict. Just a neatly arranged tea service on the command console. A napkin with the words, "Stop by for cookies next time." L. And worst of all, a music loop humming Glenn Miller's "In the Mood." The outpost was quarantined for psychic contamination. Similar incidents followed. A military census hub on Othar's spine began auto-registering deceased humans as active citizens. A vile intelligence facility on Quorn suddenly shut down its quantum grid and began broadcasting bedtime stories in human languages. Even more disturbingly, none of these actions involved sabotage. There were no bombs, no breaches, only confusion, symbolic erasure, psychological rewiring. Lyra didn't need to destroy the Dominion. She needed it to question its own systems. She moved unseen through fringe worlds, slipping aboard cargo transports in maintenance uniforms, blending into service networks no one monitored. Her face was never captured, her name never spoken aloud. And yet, every Dominion officer from field scouts to admirals began checking shadows a little longer, pausing before giving orders, rereading old logs for signs of myth. One field commander, stationed on the outpost of Vindrax 11, reported a lingering discomfort after discovering his personal AI had been reprogrammed to recite Shakespearean insults in his sleep cycle. He resigned the next day. Meanwhile, Bird, her AI, was learning. Its voice modulation had evolved from mechanical chirps to dry, sarcastic commentary pulled from centuries of archived human drama. "If you destabilize one more military fleet with swing music, I'm going to require therapy modules," it muttered, as Lyra rerouted an entire fleet's command relays using a corrupted Earth travel documentary. Her tactics weren't random. They were carefully designed to inflict narrative dissonance. She stole nothing of material value, but she erased records, renamed ships mid-transit, hijacked broadcasts with Terran sitcom laugh tracks. On the planet Silaran, a Dominion governor awoke to find her portrait hall rearranged into a gallery of Earth's extinct species, each tagged with Dominion call signs. The implication was clear. Everything collapses, even you. Marshal Krex doubled security protocols. New mandates were enforced. Officers had to recite anti-propaganda affirmations daily, ships were scanned for anomalous frequencies, and possession of Terran artifacts, books, music, cultural relics, was punishable by vaporization. But fear doesn't obey policy. And Lyra knew that empires born from conquest rarely survive irony. She sent diplomatic pouches filled with cookies to frontier admirals. Just cookies, no notes, no messages. And yet, one admiral resigned within hours, muttering something about ghosts that bake. Palak, the twitchy junior envoy in the Dominion's bureaucratic maze, was the first to take her seriously. He began collecting reports the others ignored, stories of a woman offering tea to command units, of old Earth lullabies sung by malfunctioning, defense turrets, of children on fringe worlds drawing the revenant mark in the dust without knowing what it meant. He wasn't scared, he was curious. And in the quiet corners of the Dominion's capital, he began mapping the myth as if it were a real offensive, building a profile of someone who fought not with warheads, but with implication, with patterns. Lyra had become something else entirely, not a soldier, not a terrorist, a narrative parasite, a reminder. And as Bird helpfully observed while playing a remixed jazz loop over the emergency Dominion alert channels, she's not hiding anymore. She's decorating. The Veiled Dominion's grip, once absolute and unquestioned, began to fray, not from rebellion, but from sheer uncertainty. Entire sectors stopped responding, not because they were destroyed, but because they started laughing. Battle hardened. Fleets refused deployment orders when their navigation AI began printing Earth poetry instead of coordinates. Tactical drills were interrupted by spontaneous music interludes no one could trace. Ships vanished into false warp corridors constructed from hacked Dominion jump gates. ghost lanes redirected by someone who understood their rigid systems better than they did. The commanders came back babbling about picnics in null space and conversations that never happened. More than a few retired to isolated monasteries on fringe moons, unwilling to speak further. Lyra Vaughn had become more than a name. She was now a riddle wrapped in a smirk and sealed with a cup of chamomile tea. Marshal Krex, once the mind behind 1,000 victories, now stared hollow-eyed at cascading reports of psychosocial degradation, vectors, and narrative coherence loss. He held meetings beneath silence domes, but even then, he could feel her presence in the shadows, never seen, always felt. "She's not attacking," his analysts cried. "She's reframing. She's undoing our meaning." Protocols were rewritten. Officers were ordered to ignore any cultural references related to Earth, to speak only in the approved Vael dialect, and to purge any encountered artifacts on sight. But still, they cracked. On the icy moons of Gratha, a Dominion dreadnought returned to port entirely intact, yet its crew was gone, replaced by antique mannequins wearing Dominion uniforms and Jazz-era hats. The logs simply read, "No one likes being told they're extinct." Lyra left behind no casualties, only implications. Bird's voice, now eerily calm and fluent in over a dozen sarcastic idioms, whispered across Dominion defense grids with playful menace. "You feared extinction, but what you should have feared was embarrassment." Stations stopped answering Central Command, not from mutiny, but from fear of ridicule. Commanders refused to report malfunctions involving Terran, music, cookies, or misplaced books because doing so now felt like admitting superstition. Silence spread, not imposed, but born from shame. Palak, once the Dominion's most easily ignored bureaucrat, now found himself summoned to strategy sessions and interrogated on how to counteract mythological insurgency vectors. He tried to explain, "You can't kill what's become a metaphor. She isn't fighting you. She's replacing you with stories." His warnings were met with sneers until, during a live transmission to the Dominion High Assembly, the central projector glitched and began streaming an old Earth sitcom. Lyra's voice played over the laugh track. "Hi, just wanted to thank you for hosting the intergalactic premiere of Oops, You Lost the War." Popcorn? The assembly floor erupted into chaos. Sectors fell, not through conquest, but through paralysis, leaders refusing to move, to decide, terrified they'd become part of the joke. Religious castes within the Dominion split over whether Lyra Vaughn was a spectral tormentor, a divine punishment, or the reincarnation of Earth's sarcasm, gods. Meanwhile, on forgotten moons and drifting colonies, old Terran beacons sparked back to life. Hidden enclaves, sleeper cells, former diplomats, janitors, smugglers, all the vanished fragments of humanity began responding to signals embedded in lullabies and jazz chords. The revenant remnants stirred. They didn't rise in formation. They simply responded. A cargo loader on Velas dropped his freight mid-shift, stared at the flickering transmission and whispered, "She's real." Across 10 systems, 1,000 nameless humans, long forgotten, culturally assimilated or hidden in plain sight, paused, smiled, and remembered who they were. No weapons, no calls to arms, just one pulse felt across the void. Lyra was not alone. She never had been. And the Vael Dominion, for all its fleets and firewalls, found itself battling the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. An idea with a sense of humor. It began not with a war cry, but with the hum of a lunchbox. On the marble floor of the Vael Dominion's capital citadel, beneath the vaulted black glass of the obsidian chamber, Lyra Vaughn walked in alone, unarmed, uninvited, and unmistakably amused. She wore a faded Earth exploration jacket over mismatched boots, a tea thermos in one hand, and a bright red metal lunchbox in the other, adorned with peeling stickers of extinct Terran animals. The guards, cloaked in obsidian armor, didn't stop her. They didn't move at all. Their systems had already been rewritten to register her as a visiting historical artifact. Inside, the High Conclave had gathered in emergency session, desperate to reclaim control of the collapsing Dominion. Marshal Krex, once the Empire's unshakable strategist, sat in stone-faced silence as Lyra casually placed her lunchbox on the grand negotiation table, carved from meteorite and ancestral bone. "Before we begin," she said with a gentle smile, "I brought cookies." The room froze, as if acknowledging a weapon that didn't technically exist, but still carried infinite weight. She didn't demand surrender. She didn't issue threats. Instead, she pulled out a napkin, unfolded a small sandwich, and waited. Silence stretched like tension wire. Palak, now elevated to emergency diplomatic envoy, was the first to break it. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, voice trembling. Lyra took a sip from her thermos. "Neither are you, technically. The Dominion died 12 cultural shifts ago. It just hasn't accepted the paperwork." As she spoke, across the galaxy, the Revenant mark pulsed in forgotten corners. Embedded subroutines in communication satellites, resonance keys in forgotten architecture, lullaby protocols in old Earthkind escape pods. One by one, old transmitters blinked to life. In ports, cantinas, repair bays, and abandoned libraries, humans once thought lost began transmitting not coordinates, but reminders, quotes, jokes, recipes. Their legacy, once assumed extinct, reassembled. Itself not as a military force, but as a narrative flood, unstoppable, quiet, and intimate. The Dominion's systems faltered. Strategic AI models began referencing human literature. Fleet simulators crashed when trying to predict Lyra's next move because her actions didn't follow threat logic. They followed dinner schedules. In the chamber, Marshal Krex rose slowly. "You weaponized mythology," he growled. "You made yourself into a disease. You infected belief." Lyra stood as well, gently setting down her tea. "No, Marshal. You did that. I just reminded everyone that forgetting us doesn't erase us." He clenched his fists, but the holographic Dominion banner behind him flickered, its sacred algorithm overwritten, replaced with an old Earth phrase, "still breathing." The words pulsed in every Dominion system, from palace to prison. Across. The stars, those who had once bowed, now chuckled quietly to themselves. Leaders who had enforced obedience found their own AI networks responding in Earth sarcasm. Resistance had been unnecessary. Faith, memory, and embarrassment had done more than any fleet could, and Lyra didn't end the Dominion. She merely let it see itself through human eyes, absurd, tired, and afraid. Krex slumped back into his chair, defeated not by violence, but by irrelevance. Outside the Citadel, people gathered, not to cheer, but to listen. Humans and non-humans alike, once suppressed, now connected by this strange, enduring myth of a woman who made empires unravel by offering cookies and asking inconvenient questions. Bird's voice echoed softly in the background as systems rebooted across the stars. Legacy confirmed. Target confused. Tea temperature optimal. Lyra stepped out beneath a twilight sky, the stars brighter than they had ever seemed. She wasn't smiling anymore, not because she was sad, but because she no longer needed the armor of irony. The Dominion hadn't just fallen, it had changed. Rewritten by the quiet persistence of a species that refused to vanish, whose greatest weapon was never its technology, but its refusal to be forgotten. She walked into the crowd, into the ripple she had started, not as a savior, not as a leader, but as a memory, still breathing,